They say you can tell a person by the company they keep, but what about the woman who walks alone? What about the one with no circle, no crew, no crowd cheering her name? Society looks at her and whispers something must be wrong with her. They mistake her silence for weakness, her solitude for emptiness. But what they don't understand is that sometimes the loudest strength grows in the quietest spaces. See, being alone in a world full of noise is not a curse, it's a classroom. Every empty chair at her table teaches her self-respect. Every unanswered call shows her the power of self-reliance. Every night she spends in silence becomes another brick in the foundation of her resilience. She's not friendless because she's unworthy. She's friendless because she refuses to settle for fake smiles, empty loyalty, and shallow connections. This is not the story of a victim. This is the story of a builder. A woman shaping herself in the shadows while the world overlooks her. And when she steps into the light, she won't need a crowd behind her because she will already be complete within herself. Isolation in a loud world is a reality a lot of people don't talk about. You can be in a room full of people, music blasting, laughter bouncing off the walls, and still feel like you're on an island nobody else can reach. That kind of isolation isn't about distance, it's about connection. It's about knowing that the people around you don't really see you, don't really hear you, and don't really understand what moves you deep inside. A woman with no friends can carry that feeling every single day because society tells her that her worth is reflected in her circle, in her squad, and how many likes and comments she gets. But when the lights go down, she's left with silence, and that silence feels heavier when the world outside is so loud with noise, opinions, distractions, and empty conversation. When you're isolated in a loud world, you notice things differently. You see people chasing validation from strangers, building entire identities off of temporary applause, and you realize how easy it is to get lost in the crowd. For a woman with no friends, that crowd doesn't pull her in, it pushes her out. It's like being at a concert and everyone is moving to the beat, but you're the only one who doesn't hear the music. Space between her and the rest of the world becomes a constant reminder that her path is not the same. Some people confuse that with weakness, like if you're alone, you must be unwanted, unworthy, or broken. But isolation doesn't always come from being unwanted. It often comes from being unmatched. Think about how much courage it takes to walk through life without that safety net of a friend group, without the comfort of someone always ready to co-sign your moves. A woman with no friends has to navigate situations most people never face. She's got nobody hyping her up when she doubts herself, nobody clapping when she wins, and nobody telling her keep going when she's exhausted. She's forced to find those words within herself that can feel cold like winter stretching too long, but it also shapes her into someone different. The isolation becomes a training ground where she builds the muscles of self-respect, self-belief, and self-motivation. The loud world outside doesn't make it easier. Everywhere she looks, people are projecting highlight reels, social feeds, fake smiles, shallow connections. It creates this illusion that everyone is surrounded by love, that everyone has a tight-knit circle, that everyone belongs somewhere. So when she scrolls through and sees those images, the isolation sharpens because she knows what it feels like when nobody's checking in, nobody's calling, nobody's pulling into the group photo. But the truth is, a lot of those people posting aren't as connected as they seem. That's the noise, constant distracting, and surface level. The woman with no friends is navigating silence while the world tries to drown her with sound. And in that silence, she learns clarity. When you don't have outside voices steering your decisions, you learn to listen to your own instincts. She has to trust herself more than most people ever will because she doesn't have the comfort of leaning on someone else's opinion. That isolation becomes a classroom, teaching her to separate what she truly wants from what the world tells her she should want. She starts recognizing the difference between companionship and convenience, between loyalty and performance. And when she sees that, it's hard for her to accept anything less than something real. That's why the world feels even louder, because the fakeness stands out. The pretenders are obvious, and she doesn't want to be part of that play. Isolation in a loud world also exposes the way society views women. A woman with no friends is often judged quicker than a man in the same position. People say she's bitter, she's difficult, she's cold, or she's antisocial. They attach labels to her because they can't understand how she survives without constant companionship. But that judgment is just another form of noise. The truth is, her ability to keep standing in that kind of isolation speaks to her resilience. It shows she's not bending to fit into spaces that don't respect her. She's not shrinking just to be accepted. That takes a kind of backbone most people never develop because they never have to. It's important to understand how draining that loud world can be when you're isolated from it. Every time she steps into a social space, she feels the gap between herself and others. Conversations might feel shallow, interactions feel transactional, and the energy exchange feels one-sided. That's why she pulls back. Not because she doesn't want connection, but because empty connection is heavier than no connection at all. The isolation is almost a shield, protecting her from getting drowned in meaningless noise. But even with that shield, the weight of isolation is real. Nights feel longer, victories feel incomplete, and setbacks feel sharper. That's the part nobody glamorizes. It's easy to say solitude builds strength, but living it is another story. She might cry behind closed doors. She might question her worth. She might wonder if she'll ever find people who truly get her. And in those moments, the loud world outside feels cruel because it parades community in her face while she sits alone. Yet even in those moments, isolation forges something inside her. She learns that her identity isn't tied to who stands beside her. It's tied to who she becomes when she stands alone. The beauty of isolation in a loud world is that it forces authenticity. She has no audience to perform for, no group to please, no approval to chase. That's freedom, even if it feels heavy at first. She can experiment, fail, rebuild, and grow without the noise of judgment from so-called friends. She becomes her own anchor in the chaos, her own motivation in the silence. And though the world screams with distractions, she moves at her own frequency, one that's not dependent on anyone else tuning in. Strength in solitude isn't something that's handed to you, it's something you earn through experience. Through those long nights when there's nobody else to lean on. Through those moments where the silence feels louder than any crowd you've ever stood in. A woman with no friends has to find that strength in places most people never have to look. She doesn't have the comfort of calling someone up when life gets heavy. She doesn't have a group chat full of support waiting to pour into her. What she does have is herself. And that means every doubt, every fear, every weight on her shoulders has to be faced head on without anyone to soften the blow. That kind of solitude is demanding. It forces you to build resilience like muscle, rep after rep, until you become strong enough to carry what once felt unbearable. When people think of strength, they often picture something physical, something visible, like lifting weights or taking hits and still standing. But the strength that solitude creates is invisible. It's in a way you can stand in your truth when nobody is there to validate you. It's in a way you can keep moving forward when nobody is watching, nobody is clapping, nobody even knows the battle you're fighting. That's a different type of toughness because it comes from discipline and self-trust, not applause. A woman with no friends learns early on that she can't wait for someone else to push her, so she learns to push herself. She becomes her own motivator, her own critic, her own accountability partner, and that's not easy, but it's powerful. In solitude, strength grows from stillness. When the world is quiet around you, you're forced to confront yourself. You see your flaws with no filter, you recognize your weaknesses without denial, and you face your insecurities without anyone distracting you from them. That can feel uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also the only way growth really happens. A woman in solitude learns how to sit with herself without running, without numbing, without filling the empty space with meaningless company. She builds the ability to hold her own pain and still move with grace. That's strength that can't be faked because it comes from surviving what most people avoid. Solitude also gives her time to build her skills, her vision, her foundation. While others are busy filling their calendars with social noise, she's got the freedom to focus inward. She can study, create, work, and build without distraction. That doesn't mean it's easy. The quiet can feel suffocating at times, but it also means she's not pulled in 100 directions by other people's needs. The discipline to take that solitude and turn it into progress is a strength on its own. It means she learns to invest in herself, to plant seeds that will one day grow into something far greater than temporary companionship could ever give her. Strength in solitude is also emotional endurance. It's learning how to comfort yourself when there's nobody around to tell you it'll be okay. It's figuring out how to pick yourself up when you've fallen and there's no hand stretched out to help. It's realizing that every scar you carry is proof that you didn't break when life tried to crush you. A woman with no friends becomes her own healer, her own source of love, her own reminder that she's worthy even when nobody else says it. That type of inner strength can be taken away because it's rooted in self-reliance. It's also a spiritual strength that comes from solitude. When you're alone, you start to sense the bigger picture. You start to realize that you don't need constant human presence to be connected. You can connect with your purpose, with your spirit, with the energy that drives you forward. A woman with no friends learns to pray in her own way, to meditate, to breathe, to ground herself. She builds a relationship with herself that becomes unshakable because she knows she's never truly alone as long as she's aligned with something greater than the noise around her. That connection fuels her strength in ways that other people might never understand. Solitude also teaches boundaries. When you spend time alone, you start to understand what you truly value, what you can tolerate, and what you refuse to accept. That clarity becomes strength because it means she won't settle for half love, fake loyalty, or friendships that drain her. She's learned that she can survive on her own, so she doesn't need to compromise her worth just to keep someone around. That's power, because most people stay in toxic circles out of fear of being alone. A woman who has built strength in solitude doesn't have that fear anymore. She knows her peace is more valuable than company that doesn't respect her. Even in the hardest times, solitude shapes her into someone unbreakable. She may cry, she may stumble, but she won't stay down. Every time she stands back up by herself, her strength multiplies. She becomes a living example of endurance, of persistence, of quiet resilience. And while the world is obsessed with quick fixes, easy validation, and constant companionship, she embodies something different. She shows that real strength isn't about how many people stand beside you. It's about how solid you are when you stand alone. The cost of fake friends is heavier than the weight of no friends at all, because betrayal always cuts deeper than solitude. When a woman has no friends, she feels the sting of loneliness. But when she surrounds herself with people who pretend to care, she pays a price in trust, in energy, and peace of mind. Fake friends are attacks on the soul, draining you slowly while convincing you they add value. They smile in your face, laugh at your jokes, and tell you they got your back. But their loyalty is paper thin. And when the time comes for them to show up, to sacrifice, to ride with you through storms, they fold. The cost of letting them close is discovering they were never really there, and that discovery leaves scars that take years to heal. Fake friends are expensive because they don't just waste your time. They distort your vision. They whisper doubt into your dreams. They downplay your accomplishments. They disguise envy as advice. A woman who surrounds herself with those kinds of people starts questioning her own power. She might hold back on moves that would change her life because her so-called circle doesn't clap for her, doesn't encourage her, doesn't reflect belief back at her. Her sisters don't. She wastes energy trying to win their approval, trying to prove herself to people who were never rooting for her in the first place. That energy could have been used to build, to grow, to heal, but instead it gets drained into a black hole of pretense. There's also the financial cost. Fake friends can push you into spending money to maintain bonds that aren't real. Dinners, parties, trips, things that feel like connection but are really just transactions. A woman with fake friends can end up broke emotionally and financially, pouring into people who never pour back. She picks up tabs, gives rides, lends money, offers help, and in return she gets excuses. They're there for the good times but disappear in the hard times. The cost isn't just in dollars, it's in realizing how much of herself she gave to people who never deserved it. The mental cost of fake friends is even more brutal. They create confusion because they don't show their hand right away. One day they feel supportive, the next day they're distant. They gossip behind her back, but smile to her face. That unpredictability makes her question herself, asking what she did wrong, wondering why the vibe changed. Over time, it chips away at her confidence. She starts feeling paranoid, doubting her worth, because the people closest to her treat her like she's disposable. That kind of mental strain lingers even after they're gone, because it takes time to rebuild the ability to trust. The emotional cost is tied to betrayal. Nothing hurts more than realizing someone you let close, someone you shared your secrets with, was never solid. A fake friend learns your weaknesses, your fears, your vulnerabilities, and sometimes they use that knowledge against you. They might expose your business to others, mock your struggles, or minimize your pain. And because you let them in, the betrayal hits harder than any outsider's attack ever could. A woman with fake friends carries wounds that feel heavier than solitude ever will. Because at least being alone is honest. Fake love feels safe until it's not, and when it crumbles, the pain is doubled. The loss of the friend and the loss of trust. There's also the cost of distraction. Fake friends pull you into environments and behaviors that don't align with your goals. They might tempt you with drama, keep you stuck in cycles of gossip, or encourage self-destruction because your growth makes them uncomfortable. A woman trying to elevate can't rise with fake friends around because they'll keep tugging at her ankles, reminding her of the old life, keeping her in spaces where she can't expand. She spends months, maybe years, entertaining their chaos instead of building her own future. And when she finally realizes it, she sees just how much time she lost chasing loyalty from people who were never built for it. Fake friends cause peace. Peace is priceless, but once it's gone, you feel its absence in every corner of your life. Being around fake people creates tension, even when you don't fully realize it. You sense the jealousy, you sense the dishonesty, you sense the shallow energy. That unease lingers after you leave them because your spirit knows it's surrounded by people who don't genuinely love you. The constant second guessing, the constant watching your back, the constant effort to read between the lines, that robs you of inner calm. A woman with fake friends might laugh in photos, but behind closed doors, she feels drained, restless, and unsettled. The cost of fake friends is also opportunity. Every hour spent with them is an hour not invested in real connections or in personal growth. They occupy space in your life that could be filled by people who truly support you, people who challenge you to be better, people who celebrate you with no agenda. By holding on to fake friends, a woman unknowingly blocks herself from receiving the genuine love she deserves. She lowers her standards to keep them around, forgetting that she deserves authenticity. That opportunity lost is invisible until she steps away and finally breathes in the freedom of solitude. What makes the cost of fake friends so dangerous is that it's hidden. Unlike solitude, where the loneliness is obvious, fake friendships disguise themselves as comfort. They give the illusion of connection, so you don't notice the damage right away. You feel surrounded, but in reality, you're just alone in disguise. And when the mask comes off, when the truth finally shows, the pain is deeper because you realize how much time, energy, and love you invested into a lie. Turning loneliness into focus is one of the most powerful transformations a woman with no friends can make. You know, loneliness by itself can feel like a trap, like walls closing in, like silence pressing against your chest until you can hardly breathe. But inside that silence lies a choice. Either let it swallow you or flip it into something productive, something that sharpens you instead of breaking you. A woman who decides to use her loneliness as fuel discovers that the very thing that once hurt her becomes the same force that builds her. It's where focus comes in, because focus is the bridge between pain and purpose. Loneliness means she's not pulled in 1,000 directions by other people's demands. There are no last-minute calls dragging her into pointless drama, no fake obligations stealing her time, no constant need to adjust her pace for someone else's comfort. At first, that feels empty, but once she shifts her perspective, that emptiness becomes space, and space is valuable. Space allows her to sit down with her thoughts and organize them. Space allows her to study, to plan, to write, to practice. What looked like isolation turns into a private laboratory where she experiments with her ideas, builds her vision, and strengthens her skills without distraction. That focus is something people surrounded by noise rarely achieve because they're too busy trying to keep up with everyone else. When loneliness shifts into focus, time changes. Instead of watching the hours crawl by in silence, she starts to see every minute as an opportunity. She might read a book that changes her mindset. She might pick up a skill that sets her apart. She might start journaling and discover clarity about her life that she never had before. Focus allows her to take the raw energy of loneliness, the ache, the emptiness, the longing, and redirect it into motion. That motion doesn't erase the loneliness, but it transforms it. Instead of feeling powerless, she starts feeling in control because now she's building something out of the quiet. There's also discipline in that transformation. Focus doesn't come automatically just because you're alone. At first, loneliness wants to make you numb out, waste time, scroll endlessly, drown in distractions. But when a woman with no friends realizes that those habits only make her feel emptier, she makes a different choice. She trains herself to sit with the discomfort and channel it into productivity. That's where her discipline grows. She sets goals for herself, and because she has nobody else to push her, she learns to push herself. Discipline born out of loneliness becomes a superpower because she's not dependent on external validation to stay consistent. Her drive comes from within, and that kind of drive doesn't fade when people disappear. Turning loneliness into focus also builds vision. When the noise of other people's voices fades away, she can finally hear her own. That inner voice might be faint at first, but with focus, it grows louder and clearer. She begins to recognize what she truly wants instead of what others expect of her. Maybe she wants to build a business, write a book, learn a craft, improve her health, or change her environment. Focus sharpens those desires into plans, and because she has so much uninterrupted time, she can actually put in the work to bring them to life. Loneliness creates a void, but focus fills that void with purpose, and purpose is stronger than pain. It's not just about productivity, it's about healing too. Focus gives her a direction when loneliness tries to drag her into despair. Instead of sitting in the dark wondering why nobody's around, she can channel that emotion into self-care, into working out, into creating routines that ground her. Every time she chooses to pour into herself instead of waiting for someone else to pour into her, she grows stronger. That strength becomes visible over time. Her body changes, her skills improve, her mindset sharpens, her confidence rises, and all of it came from using focus as an antidote to loneliness. This is another layer too. Focus and loneliness allows her to outgrow the need for shallow company. Once she starts making progress, once she starts building herself, she realizes that most of the people she once wanted around her weren't adding anything real. They were just filling space. Now her standard for connection is higher because she's seen what she can accomplish alone. That means if someone enters her life, they need to bring authenticity, support, and value. She won't tolerate distractions or negativity because her focus taught her how valuable her energy is. Loneliness gave her time, but focus taught her how to protect it. Even the emotional weight of loneliness becomes fuel for creativity. Pain has a way of sparking art, of inspiring expression. A woman who feels alone might write poetry, create music, design clothes, paint pictures, start a podcast, or share her story in ways that resonate with others. Her focus transforms loneliness into something that not only heals her, but also speaks to people she's never met. Ironically, the very loneliness that once made her feel disconnected can become the thing that connects her to the world on a deeper level. Loneliness also brings clarity about priorities. Focus allows her to look at her life honestly and ask what truly matters. She doesn't waste time chasing popularity or fitting into spaces that don't fit her. Instead, she invests in growth, stability, health, and purpose. She realizes that solitude isn't punishment, it's training. And the focus she develops in that training will carry her far beyond the moment when loneliness used to feel unbearable. Resilience of a woman is something you can't always see on the surface, but it's built in the quiet battles she fights every day. It's in the way she carries herself even when her heart is heavy, and the way she shows up even when nobody showed up for her. For a woman with no friends, resilience isn't an option, it's survival. She learns early that if she doesn't pick herself up, nobody else will. That kind of resilience is born from necessity, from nights spent crying alone, and mornings where she still wipes her face, gets dressed, and handles her responsibilities like nothing happened. It's the strength to bend without breaking, to fall without staying down, to keep walking when her legs feel like lead. Her resilience comes from pain, but also from persistence. Every time life tested her, she had to choose between folding or standing. And over time, those choices stacked up, each one making her stronger, sharper, tougher. People might look at her and assume she's cold or detached, but what they don't see is the battle she's already survived. They don't see the moments where she had to swallow her fear and push forward with no support system behind her. That's why resilience is so deeply embedded in her. It's not just about bouncing back, it's about refusing to stay broken in the first place. The resilience of a woman shows up in her ability to adapt. She can walk through loss, heartbreak, disappointment, and still find a way to keep moving. Even when her world shifts beneath her feet, she adjusts her balance and learns how to stand again. That adaptability is resilience in motion. It's not that she doesn't feel the weight of what she's going through, she feels it deeply. But she refuses to let it define her. She allows herself to grieve, to hurt, to feel, but she also knows how to rebuild. A woman with no friends becomes her own architect, designing a life out of the rubble of what collapsed. Her resilience is also emotional armor. When people underestimate her, dismiss her, or talk behind her back, she doesn't let it stop her. She's already used to walking alone, so she doesn't need their approval to keep moving. That doesn't mean the words don't sting. It means she knows how to process the sting and keep pushing anyway. She's built to endure, to keep her eyes forward even when negativity surrounds her. That resilience becomes a shield, not to hide behind, but to deflect what could have destroyed her spirit. A resilient woman knows how to transform setbacks into stepping stones. Every failure, every betrayal, every disappointment becomes material for growth. She doesn't pretend it didn't hurt, but she learns from it, stores the lesson, and uses it as fuel. Her resilience isn't about pretending she's unaffected. It's about refusing to let pain go to waste. She'll take the same energy that tried to break her and convert it into progress. That's why resilience looks like strength from the outside, but inside it's really wisdom. It's the knowledge that nothing she's been through was strong enough to stop her. The resilience of a woman is quiet but undeniable. She might not talk about her struggles, but they show in her patience and her persistence and her determination. She has learned to carry burdens in silence, not because she wants to, but because she had no choice. A woman with no friends doesn't have people to vent to, people to lean on, people to unload her pain with. That forces her to internalize a lot of struggle. And out of that internalization, resilience is forged. She learns to comfort herself, to motivate herself, to heal herself. That self-sufficiency becomes the backbone of her strength. Resilience also shows in the way she holds her dignity. Even when she's been disrespected, ignored, or overlooked, she doesn't let it strip her of her worth. She knows she's more than how people treat her. That's not easy to hold on to when you're walking alone, because loneliness can make you question your value. But her resilience keeps her grounded, reminding her that her value is not up for debate. She continues to carry herself with pride because resilience teaches her that respect starts with how she treats herself. Her resilience is visible in her ability to still love and still hope even after pain. A woman with no friends might have been hurt by fake ones, betrayed by people she trusted, or let down by those she cared about. Yet she still has the courage to keep her heart open, to keep believing that one day she will find the right kind of love and connection. That takes resilience on a different level, because it's easy to become bitter, to close yourself off, to say never again. But she resists that urge, choose instead to keep growing while protecting her peace. That balance, guarding her heart but not hardening it completely, is one of the purest signs of resilience. Resilience isn't always loud victory. Sometimes it's just showing up for another day. Sometimes it's smiling when you feel broken inside. Sometimes it's holding it together for your family, for your children, for your own future, even when you want to fall apart. A woman with no friends carries that resilience daily, even when nobody notices. She doesn't get applause for it, doesn't get validation for it, but she does it anyway. Well, that's what makes it powerful. Her resilience isn't for show, it's for survival. Reframing the narrative is one of the most powerful things a woman with no friends can do, because the way the world labels her is often unfair, shallow, and rooted in stereotypes. Society loves to attach meanings to a woman's solitude. If she has no friends, people assume she must be bitter, unlikable, arrogant, or broken. They whisper about what must be wrong with her instead of recognizing what might be right. That's the default narrative, a story told from the outside looking in, without understanding the truth behind her reality. Reframing the narrative means taking back control of that story, reshaping it into something empowering instead of shameful. It's about rejecting the assumptions and choosing her own definition of what being friendless means. When a woman reframes her narrative, she flips the script from loneliness to independence. Instead of internalizing society's idea that her solitude makes her weak, she starts to see it as strength. Having no friends doesn't have to mean she's unwanted. It can mean she refuses to settle for shallow bonds. It can mean she's selective about who she lets close because she values quality over quantity. It can mean she's focused on her purpose and she knows not everyone can walk with her on that path. By reframing the story, she takes power away from the stigma and replaces it with pride in her choices. Framing also means changing how she sees herself in the mirror. When people look at her and project loneliness, she learns to look back at herself and see resilience, clarity, and self-respect. That shift is internal first. If she believes the world's story about her, that she's flawed for being alone, then it will weigh her down, making her feel unworthy. But when she reclaims her narrative, she refuses to let other people's shallow understanding define her. And she recognizes that being alone is not a punishment, it's an opportunity. It's time to grow, to heal, to build, to discover who she is without external noise. That reframing isn't denial, it's transformation. The narrative of a woman with no friends has historically been painted with negativity. She's labeled as antisocial, difficult, even dangerous. But reframing requires breaking those patterns. It means saying, no, this isn't failure, this is freedom. It's freedom from fake loyalty, from toxic friendships, from people who smile in your face but hope for your downfall. It's freedom from pouring energy into people who drain you. It's freedom from pretending just to belong. That new perspective doesn't erase the ache of loneliness, but it shifts the meaning of it. Now, the absence of people isn't evidence of her weakness, it's evidence of her strength to walk alone rather than walk with the wrong crowd. Reframing the narrative is also about teaching others to see differently. The more she embraces her story with pride, the harder it becomes for people to use it against her. If someone says she has no friends, she can respond with, I have peace, I have focus, I have myself. That confidence flips the insult into a statement of power. Over time, people start to understand that her solitude is not a flaw, it's a boundary. They see that she's not isolated out of rejection, but out of choice. That reframing forces them to respect her, even if they don't understand her fully. A woman who reframes her narrative also gives permission for others to do the same. There are countless people who feel shame for being alone, who force themselves into circles that don't fit them just to avoid judgment. When they see her standing tall in her solitude, unapologetic and authentic, they realize they can embrace their own path too. Her reframing becomes a form of leadership, showing others that solitude is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of self-discovery. She becomes proof that being friendless doesn't mean being powerless. Reframing the narrative is about shifting from external validation to internal validation. It's about realizing that her value doesn't come from who surrounds her, but from who she is. She no longer waits for applause to feel worthy. She no longer needs to be included in someone else's circle to feel whole. She reframes solitude as sovereignty, the ability to rule over her own life without compromise. That sovereignty allows her to make decisions rooted in authenticity instead of fear. It keeps her grounded even when the world tries to label her as less than. Even the pain of her story gets reframed. The nights of loneliness, the moments of betrayal, the times she felt invisible. Those experiences aren't signs of failure, they're lessons, proof of her survival. She can look back and say, yes, I walked through that darkness, but look at the woman I became because of it. The reframing turns scars into symbols of strength, reminders that she has endured more than most people ever will, and she's still standing. Instead of being ashamed of her past, she reframes it as the foundation for her future. Reframing the narrative doesn't erase the reality of isolation, but it strips it of shame. It gives her ownership of her own story. And once she owns her story, nobody can use it against her again. She no longer has to prove herself to people who misunderstand her, because her reframing makes their opinions irrelevant. She defines herself, and in doing so, she rewrites the story of what it means to be a woman with no friends. So, when you hear the words "a woman with no friends," don't let your mind run to weakness. Don't let your heart confuse solitude with emptiness. Understand what it really means. It means she's learned how to survive without clapping hands. It means she's strong enough to stand without a circle holding her up. It means she's not distracted by fake love, not slowed down by shallow company, not defined by how many people show up in her pictures. Her story is not about loneliness, it's about evolution. Every quiet night, every moment of doubt, every tear she wiped on her own sleeve, those were bricks, stacking into something unshakable. That's why she walks with a certain energy now, because she knows she doesn't need to be chosen to be valuable. She knows she doesn't need to be surrounded to be powerful. A woman with no friends is not invisible, she's undeniable. She is living proof that you can lose everything you thought you needed and still become everything you were meant to be. And when the world finally sees her for who she is, it won't be because of the people around her. It'll be because of the fire within her.